Hello. So in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make a multi-piece mold around your model. So here we go. I've got our bunny, a venerable bunny here. I'm just going to close the hole in the bottom so it's a solid. This method requires a solid object as input, or a set of solid objects. So we've got the closed bunny. I'm also going to set the size. I'm going to go to Units Dimensions tool under Analysis and just look. So this is only 5 centimeters high. I'm going to make it 10 centimeters so that the numbers are a little bit more reasonable. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to make an offset shell around this bunny. So I'm going to do that by going to the Edit, Make Solid tool. This is the most robust way to do this. Change the type to accurate, leave these numbers the same, and then we can set the offset distance here to say we'll set it to 2 millimeters and see what that looks like. And we're going to run update, and that's going to compute an offset shell. Maybe let's make it 3. So that makes an outer shell. So if we accept that, the object browser is going to pop up, and we've got 2 objects, our original bunny and this solid shell. So now what we're going to do is a little trick. We're going to hide the solid one, make the original one visible. We're going to select the whole thing by hitting Command A. You can also start the select tool to do this. And then we're going to go to Edit, Flip Normals. So now this is an inside out bunny. And what we're going to do is we're going to combine that with the other one. So we're going to turn them both on, select them both, hold shift click to select, and do a combine. And now we have a single object, and we'll see if we do a plane cut that the object is actually a hollow shell. So we've made a 3 millimeter shell around our initial object. So this is a mold. However, it's not a very useful mold because it's got no lines. We can't take it apart. Now in the next step, what we need to do is basically cut this up into pieces. So if you had a simple object, you could do that by just doing something, like a plane cut, and set this to slice. You accept that, and then your object's actually cut in half. It'll be hard to tell until you select one side and do Modify, Expand to Connected, and then Edit, Separate, and now you can see there's 2 objects. But that only lets you cut along planes. So if you wanted something more complicated than a plane cut, I'm going to show you how to do that. So we've got our object here. What we're going to do is we're going to make another offset shell. So we're going to do Make Solid. We're going to do Accurate again. We're going to set a smaller offset distance this time. And let's do another update. It's going to compute. We get a little bit of an offset shell. That's all we're going to need. And we're going to accept that. So now we've got 2 objects again, and our initial, mold object is hidden. So we're going to work on this object now. And what we're going to do basically is we need to paint it into separate regions. We're going to do that with face groups. So I'm going to do it with, I'm just going to make 3 so you can see the basic idea. So what I'm going to essentially do is say this is roughly what I want my parting line to be. You could be more accurate, but I'll show you. So once you've got an initial loop, we're going to use Modify, Smooth Boundary. Smooth Boundary tool, you can drag on these sliders to get it smoother or less smooth. For this example, I'm going to crank up the smoothing. So you see once I accept, I've got a ring and I've got this face group. If you don't see the different colors, hold down the space bar and check that face groups are highlighted and not the vertex colors of the color mode. So now I'm just going to select a bit across there. I'm going to modify, expand to groups, hotkey G, and create a face group for that whole side. So now you can see we've got that whole piece selected. Essentially we can select that by double clicking. So now we're going to turn this into an object we can boolean with that original object to essentially cut out the mold piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this and do Edit, Separate. So now I have 2 objects. Now I'm going to hide this one and just work on this one for a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this hole. So I'm going to do Edit, Erase, and Fill. Now initially it does some crazy thing. We're going to change this to Flat Remeshed mode, which precisely fills the input hole with this sort of smooth patch. If you want it even smoother, you could run smoothing tool afterwards, but this is good enough for me. So I'm going to accept the output, and you'll see now what I can do. Now what I want to do is separate out this patch. Now the only problem is we lost our face groups. We don't have a separate face group there. So I'm going to start the selection tool. I'm going to set this crease angle slider to some reasonably high value. And now I'm just going to paint on the edge, and you can see the painting doesn't go across the edge. So this is a useful thing that will let you get back face groups that sometimes get lost. So I'm just going to paint that all in and create a face group. And then I'm going to separate that face group again. So now I'm going to copy that, because I want 2 copies. You'll see why in a second. So I'm going to select this guy and one of the copies and do a combine. You'll see I'll hide the other, that's the other copy. So now I've got the object. So it's the 2 patches, but you still see it's got the blue line. That means that there's still a boundary loop in there. So I'm going to do an Edit, Close Cracks. And so what that essentially does is just welds along those open boundary loops. So now this is a solid object, and the trick is I can go on the other side. Oh right, when I did that, that make solid, it also made a solid shell on the inside, which I don't need. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to do Selection Tool. I'm going to turn on Allow Back Faces. Paint a little bit. You can't see it, but if you do Expand to Connected, it has selected that in there, and then you can do Edit, Discard. Sorry, that's just a little fix we have to do. So now I've got these 2. I can do the same thing. Select them both, combine, and close cracks. Oops. Sorry, I missed something there. We need to do, this is a back facing. If I uncheck that Allow Back Faces, I can't select on it because it's back facing. So I need to paint a little bit. I'll double click. That'll select the whole thing. Flip normals. There we go. Now if we do the close cracks, we've got 2 objects. I'll cut along a sort of arbitrary parting line. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the original guy back in, make a copy, and you can probably see what's going to happen. Now I'm going to select both of those 2 and do a Boolean intersection. And that is going to give me my first mold piece. I'm going to accept that. Oh, you know what? Actually, I need to save a copy of that before I do that Boolean, because I'm going to have to subtract it from the other side. So I just made a copy with the Combine button down here. There we go. So that's mold head. I've still got another copy there, which I'm going to use to cut away from the original mold. So I'm going to make another copy of this original mold up here. And I'm going to do a Boolean difference. Right, and so that gets me 2 pieces. So now we've got 2 pieces of the mold. I'm just going to save this. Now we've got 2 pieces of the mold. We've got mold head and the back half of the mold, which we're going to now want to cut along another parting line. You remember we have this shape, so this one I don't need. This is I'll get rid of that. Remember we had this piece back here. So I want to make a second parting line along this piece. So I'm going to do what I did before. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to paint a line along it. That's going to be my sort of cutting line. It has to be connected the whole way, so if there's gaps, this won't work. So we've got to be a little bit careful with the painting. So now, if we do that smooth boundary tool, oops, so sometimes you see that red, that means I misselected something somewhere. You can see I didn't get a great selection there, but what you can also do is you go to modify and you run this optimize boundary command. Will often resolve those problems. So now we do smooth boundary. I guess I should have painted offset on one side or another, but let's just go with this. I'm going to show you something though. You see it kind of messed up around the edges here, and I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is turn smoothness down, and I'm going to use this side. That's going to let me double click and place a pin at the vertices that are on the sharp edge there. See, there's one there. Now when I turn the smoothness back up, those vertices will stay put. And so even though the rest of it gets a little bit softened, that's okay. I'm going to accept that because we've still got our sharp edge there. And I'm going to paint it on here. I'm going to expand to groups. And in here also, ooh, I can't do expand to groups back there because it's selecting on both sides. What I have to do is, I believe this, so I paint there, yeah, a little bit across, expand to groups, double click to get that group. And there we go. Now we've got this other side here. Now we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to separate this, hide this guy. To do that fill around the boundary, what I'm doing is I'm just double clicking in the selection tool right next to the boundary. Modify, or sorry, edit, erase, and fill. And make some crazy thing, change it to flat remeshed. It's going to give us a cleaner fill. We accept that. And we're going to have to use crease angle. You might need to be a bit careful once you get into the point where you've got multiple sharp edges in your mold. So I'm just going to paint carefully here at this little part here because I can see that the crease angle threshold might slide over the edge. But otherwise you can go pretty quickly. Paint that. Now I'm going to create a face group for this. Then I'm going to separate it. That's this one, make a copy. Take the original and one of the copies, doesn't matter which one, and combine, close cracks, so that the other copy is still visible. That's why you still see the blue line. So I'll hide that guy, turn on the other copy, and find the other side. There it is. Remember what I said before about flipping the normals, so I'm just going to select, before I combine them, we'll do a select all, and then edit, flip normals, combine those two, close cracks. So now I've got the two last pieces I need to do the two more booleans of this piece. So I'm going to make two copies of that piece. Actually, I don't need to save one, so I'll just make one copy. So this one, I'm going to cut off that side. Actually, I see this problem, a slight problem here. You see how this is basically coincident, so that may not work very well. So what you could do is do an extrude of this in the normal direction. No. There we go. Do an offset, a small offset. It's going to produce some probably ugly stuff in some places, but it's not going to matter for the Boolean. We'll do Boolean difference there. Oh, there's still the other one visible, so I'll hide that. Accept. The Booleans will rough up the little edges a tiny bit. That's unfortunately, there's not much we can do about that right now. So let's say funny left, or mold left, mold body left, and then we've got another side there, and the other side here. So let's do what I did before. Oh, we gotta. Well, let's try it. Let's see what happens. So there's a few little floating things there. I'm not confident that it's not going to crash if we don't do that. So I'm just going to quickly paint in here. And do offset connected. There we go, that took care of those. And so there we go. Now we have 3 pieces. Mold body right. Second piece of the mold. Third piece of the mold. Turn on transparency, you can see the 3 different shells. So there you go. Now you can print those and put something inside them. And I'll just show you one other trick.